Let's read today's newspaper. What does it tell us? It speaks about what is democracy, why democracy. What is democracy? Democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. Let's understand this with different case studies. First, going with Pakistan. In Pakistan, General Pervez Musharraf led a military coup in October 1919. He overthrew a democratically elected government and declared himself the chief executive of the country. Later, he changed his designation to president and in 2002 held a referendum in the country that granted him a 5-year extension. Pakistani media, human rights organizations, and democracy activists said that the referendum was based on malpractices and fraud. In August 2002, he issued a legal framework order that amended the Constitution of Pakistan. According to this order, the president can dismiss the national and provincial assemblies. The work of the civilian cabinet is supervised by a National Security Council, which is dominated by military officers. After passing this law, elections were held to national and provincial assemblies. So Pakistan has had elections, elected representatives have some powers, but the final power rested with military officers and General Pervez Musharraf himself. So, with this, we can understand that in a democracy, the final decision making power must rest with those elected by the people. Next, going to China. In China, elections are held regularly after every 5 years for electing the country's parliament called Guangzhou Renmin Daibao Dahui or National People's Congress. The National People's Congress has the power to appoint the president of the country. It has nearly 3,000 members elected from all over China. Some members are elected by the army. Before contesting elections, a candidate needs the approval of Chinese Communist Party. Only those who are members of Chinese Communist Party or eight smaller parties allied to it were allowed to contest elections held in 2002 and 2003. The government is always formed by the Communist Party. Next, coming to Mexico. Since its independence in 1930, Mexico holds elections after every 6 years to elect its president. The country has never been under a military or dictator's rule. But until 2000, every election was won by a party called PRI or Institutional Revolutionary Party. Opposition parties did contest elections but never managed to win. The PRI was known to use many dirty tricks to win elections. All those who were employed in government offices had to attend its party meetings. Teachers of government schools used to force parents to vote for PRI. Media largely ignored the activities of opposition political parties except to criticize them. Sometimes the polling booths were shifted from one place to another in the last minute, which made it difficult for people to cast their votes. The PRI spent a large sum of money for its candidates for campaign. By this, we can understand that a democracy must be based on a free and fair election where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing. Next, coming to Saudi Arabia, Estonia, and Fiji. Until 2015, in Saudi Arabia, women did not have the right to vote. Estonia made its citizenship rules in such a way that people belonging to Russian minority find it difficult to get the right to vote. In Fiji, the electoral system is such that vote of an indigenous Fiji has more value than that of an Indian Fiji. By this, we can understand that in a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote and each vote must have one value, which means one vote, one value. Coming to Zimbabwe. So, here we need to remember ZANU PF. whose leader was Robert Mugabe. Zimbabwe attained independence from white minority rule in 1980. Since then, the country has been ruled by ZANU-PF, the party that led the freedom struggle. Elections were held regularly and always won by ZANU-PF. President Mugabe was popular but also used unfair practices in elections. Over the years, his government changed the constitution several times to increase the power of the president and make him less accountable or responsible. Opposition party workers were harassed and their meetings disrupted. Public protests and demonstrations against the government were declared illegal. There was a law that limited the right to criticize the president. Television and radio were controlled by the government and gave only the ruling party's version. There were independent newspapers, but the government harassed those journalists who were against it. The government ignored some court judgments that went against it and pressurized judges. Robert Mugabe was finally forced out of office in 2017. So, by this situation, we can understand that a democratic government rules within limits set by a constitutional law and citizens' rights. So, let's see some features of democracy. The first feature is that the rulers are elected by the people, free and competitive elections are held. Each adult, irrespective of education, religion, caste, color, or wealth, have one vote, one value. Now, let's see some pros and cons of democracy. So first let's go to pros. Democracy is more accountable form of government. It improves the quality of decision making. It provides methods to deal with differences and conflicts. It enhances the dignity of citizens, allows to correct its own mistake. Now let's go to cons or disadvantages. Democracy leaders keep changing. This leads to instability. Second point, democracy is all about political competition and power play. No scope of morality. Democracy consulting many people leads to delay. Elected leaders are unknown with the best interests of the people, leads to bad decisions, leads to corruption as it is based on electoral competition. Ordinary people are unknown what is good for them. They should not decide anything. So now let's see some broader meaning of democracy. The most common form that democracy takes in our times is that of a representative democracy. In the countries we call democracy, all people do not rule. A majority is allowed to take decisions on the behalf of all people. Even the majority does not rule directly. The majority of people rule through their elected representatives. This becomes necessary because modern democracies involve such a large number of people that it is physically impossible for them to sit together and take a collective decision. Even if they could, the citizens does not have the time, the desire, or skills to take part in all the decisions. Those who are not powerful have the same say in taking the decision as those who are powerful. This can apply to a government or a family of any other organization. Thus, democracy is also a principle that can be applied to any sphere of life. A democratic decision involves consultation with the consent of all those who have affected by the decision. Summary: in a democracy, the final decision making power must rest with those elected by the people. For obtaining this rule, we saw the case of Pakistan, and in that we saw General Pervez Musharraf. Second, a democracy must be based on a free and fair election where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing. For obtaining this rule, we saw the case of China, wherein we saw National People's Congress, and in Mexico, we saw PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party. In a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote and each vote must have one value. This rule we got from Saudi Arabia, where women were not getting the perfect right, Estonia, where Russian minority were considered less, and in Fiji, vote of an Indian Fiji was considered less than an indigenous Fiji. A democratic government rules within limits set by constitutional laws and citizens' rights. This rule was given to us by Zimbabwe's case,
where the party was ZANU PF led by Robert Mugabe. Thank you.